he's up to. He's picking me like chicken, shucking me like corn, stewing me like an ice.
Can I ask you something?
Honey, come on. The man's trying to get some rest.
No, that's okay.
Oh,
Go ahead, ask away.
I just got to know the Kennedy assassination. Did Oswald act alone?
Hey, that's for me to know.
I like your hair in the middle with the silver hair. How old are you? 75. Get the fuck out of here. Who killed JFK? I'm not going to read all those pages. Who do you think killed him? You think the government killed him? Ooh.
Now, the disruptor-in-chief, Elon Musk, who apparently has adopted the alias, at least he changed his social media handle to Harry Balls, tweeted this morning, "Democracy in America is being..."
Yo, it's your boy, the Tesla King, Elon Musk. The boys always make my rocket shoot straight up, no homo. You bout to listen to the #1 JFK-related podcast on planet Mars. Now plug in your neural link for two numbnuts who aren't a waste of government spending, the BBB and JOEB.
Here's the BBB&JOEB, JOEB, and the BBB, baby, BBB&JOEB, rap cock and Joe Morelli, BBB&JOEB, JOEB, and the BBB, baby, BBB&JOEB, rap cock and Joe Morelli. We're coming in, only seeking the truth about JFK. It's a long-coming podcast crew. Tell 'em, Joe, here we go.
And here we go.
Love catching Joe off guard there. Coming in just a little bit early as he was taking a little puff. Puff.
You know how it goes.
It's all good. It's all good. What's up, everybody? Sorry we're a little late. It's totally my fault. Joe was on time. It's been one of them days, But we're here now. Thank you guys for hanging out and patiently waiting and talking amongst yourselves. But I promise, if you're still here, you made the right decision. It's worth it. It will be worth it. I promise. So, Joe, since you've been hanging out with these people, who all's in here? Let's welcome the people into our living room.
Sure. There's a bunch of them. I think Tiny was the first comment, and she signed in with her timestamp, although I haven't seen her recently, although I've been prepping.
She may have stepped out for a second.
Yes. She is doing God's work over there in Washington, D.C. or Virginia. We have Claude Williams here, of course, and of course, Andrew Dean, I'm sure. The double B, Brandon. Mr. JSV 650, who said, "You are fired, Rob."
Yes. All right. Rob, you're fired. Now you're rehired.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except Rob holds all the firing and hiring capabilities, so it is all in his hands. We have Sally.
Don't worry, I'll punish myself later, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
I'll do some self-flagellation.
We have Sally from across the pond.
Hello, Sally.
Yes. We have Trey, Bobby Thundernuts.
Bobby, I believe that's Mr. Sally. Hello, Bobby Thundernuts.
We have Optoeconomist, who let me start this comment. Apparently, and Optoeconomist is shadow banned over on AUS, America's Untrue Stories. You know that thing?
Yeah, unfortunately, I know what you're talking about there. Yeah.
Mark got upset after a comment by Opto, and I know this personally. Opto has really good comments. Like, not much goes by him. After making him look bad too many times, now my comment section comments have been hidden.
You've committed a mortal sin, sir. You made Mark Grubert look bad, although
No,
he needs no help making that happen.
Bro, I told him in our book that's a notch on the, that's a medal.
Right.
Right. South to West said Bobby's waiting for the last dancer to finish at the Carousel Club.
If only that was true.
Any truth? No.
No. If only that was true.
Yes. I hope he'd be a little more than this late if that was happening.
Yeah.
And
although they do call me the Minute Man, Joe. No, I'm joking, of course. I take a long time to do everything, including this podcast. So what do you figure?
Yeah. Slacker Dan, how are you? Howdy y'all. And let's see, anyone else? I'm sure more will trickle in as they always do.
See some at the end here. We got Shabird. Hello, Shabird. Craig Mallory, first time up in here. Hello.
Oh, hey.
Welcome in, Craig.
Yeah, all right. We welcome for sure. And I know we have Paula, of course, one of our favorite listeners, at least one of mine.
Yeah, Randall Brooks. What's up, Randy? Slacker Dan's in the house. Mm-hmm. South to West. I'm not sure if you mentioned.
Yes, I
did. But anyway, welcome in all.
Yes, and we also had a super chat from our favorite Rocket Queen, Colleen, earlier.
Didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And we also have from Silk City Hot Sauce, Mr. Jeff became a member at a covert operator level. Welcome, Jeff.
Yes. Yeah, so I was messaging with Jeff this week because I was like, yo, I actually need to re-up my hot sauce game. And he gave me some recommendations of even a maple habanero, a maple hot habanero. He said it wasn't even on the website yet, but he has some for me. So I have to reach back out to him, but we love Jeff, of course. And use the code Gunman if you'd like to order some Silk City hot sauce. And wow.
Oh, shit. Here we go. The Double B. Look, Joe, you got another membership.
Oh, my
It's all right. It's okay.
Well, of course, the Double B gifted 5 memberships at the Spook level, and the Spooks have access to the extra Wednesday show on the last Wednesday of the month, which is next Wednesday, Rob. And that would be a good one. This past Wednesday, a lot has happened this week, but thank you so much, Brandon.
Yeah,
you were
awfully nice of you, Brandon.
Yes.
And yeah. Thank you for giving the folks a taste. Like next week, we said Wednesday show, you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Rob, a lot has happened since last week, right? We had, of course, that big hearing in Congress, Task Force Hottie hearing number 2.
Yep, which we covered extensively this past Wednesday show.
Extensively, I heard.
Yes.
You said Joe took your time with that one. And the ironic thing about that, Rob, is to myself, I was like, okay, last hearing, we went over it. It was like almost an hour and a half. I was like, I want to spend like 30, maybe 45 minutes tops. It went like an hour 20.
Yep. That's okay. Sometimes it happens, Sometimes it happens.
Yes. But and part of that reason, Rob, I'm gonna give people a little taste and Opto a little gift here, talking about this guy, and I cut off his Twitter handle because it's not important. Mark Gruber, Gagoots. I'm not sure, but he yesterday was wondering who this Lady Scafusa, Mrs. Coe, was, and wondered how she got on the 5-person panel. And if you were listening to our Wednesday show, I did a little deep dive on her, let's say, deep state history. And you would have known the answer to that question. But long story short, she was like that other guy in the first hearing that complained about the Social Security numbers and the lack of, I guess, discretion with some of the declassifying. And it's just kind of like a deep state delay tactic almost. And I think the minority member, which would have been Democratic dude Garcia, probably put her on, just like the last guy. So if you tuned in Wednesday, you would know. So that is all I will say about that.
I am the art director around here, Mr. Turin Horse. All of the thumbnails are made by your boy. So yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Momo's up in the house. The other Scafusa Momo.
Yes. Hey, Momo, how are you, sir?
Yes.
Cammy as well, and that is definitely not a woman, was also gifted a free membership, I saw. So,
yeah.
Good shit there.
It's Australian for short for camouflage. I think we discussed that earlier.
Yo, bro, really quickly. I think one of the biggest YouTube accounts on YouTube just called it quits this past week. A lot of things have happened this past week.
America's Untold Stories?
I wish. I wish. The Outdoor Boys. Do you know about this?
The Outdoor Boys?
Yeah, it's some guy that does like survival videos.
No.
And he goes like
my forte.
No, I agree. He has 15.5 million followers. He teaches you, like, he goes camping in the Alaska for a week. I just watched a video. He spent a week with the Marine Jungle Survival Unit in Okinawa or somewhere in the deep Pacific. And he had his kids on there, his wife, like vaguely, and he's stepping away after 15.5 million followers. And I know that's our next objective.
Yeah. We'll be stepping away when we hit 15 million followers, folks. Yeah. Considering that probably will never happen. Yeah. We'll be here for a little while. Yeah. Just to say.
But very interesting to give that up. I think the last video had like 20 million views. And then we had the former FBI director calling for 86ing the current president in the sand.
Yes. Welcome to Bizarro World, folks, where right is wrong, up is down, left is right, forwards is backwards.
Yes. Ask your doctor for a note for LSD, like Lee Harvey Oswald tried to do last week.
Yes. Never hurts to ask, Joe. Just got to make sure this isn't illegal, sir, Mr. DA, before I partake.
Yeah.
And before I get started, real quick,
yeah,
check out this cool hat Doug sent me for Drop D Productions.
Ooh. That is pretty sick.
Yeah. So thank you, Doug.
Doug is killing it in the merch game these days.
Yeah. I mean, he might be like trying to
do better than us.
Career. As like a fashion designer or, a merch guy or something.
Yeah.
So if Doug starts opening up a hat business, we're in, because there's sea suckers at our merch place.
The quick hits. Yeah.
No. Just our merch place in general.
Mm-hmm.
Spreadshirt, wherever we do the thing.
Right.
I went over there today to get a steal your Patsy shirt.
Yeah.
Design's gone. I was like, what the hell? I was like, Greg just told me he ordered a shirt, so I figured it was up and running and everything was great.
Well,
and he checked the designs and it says rejected on there. I was like,
so you mentioned on Wednesday that it was in review the last time you checked, and
right.
then Greg said he ordered it on Wednesday, and I was like, "Huh, good, it got approved," and I guess it got unapproved in the meantime.
Yes, apparently it got rejected.
So will Greg get the copy that fell through the cracks?
I don't know. If he does, it's going to be worth some money because
Put
he's
it on
the
eBay.
only motherfucker with it.
Put it on eBay, Greg.
Yeah, who knows?
We'll sign it.
All right, Joe, you ready to kick this thing off a little bit here?
Let's do it.
All right. Before we get started into the Father McChann stuff, and I'll save that for last because it's interesting. I came across a couple items, of course, from New Orleans. And
back to New Orleans, Mr. Garrison.
Yeah, I can't get the fuck out of New Orleans, but that's okay. I was thinking about titling this episode "Escape from New Orleans." With some good escape from New York artwork and all that. But
bro, with the prison escape that we briefly laughed about in New Orleans Parish.
Oh, you're right. That could have got us like millions of hits, dude.
Oh, missed opportunity.
Oh well, live and learn. I found an interview with Sam Newman, right, who owned the building there, 544 Camp Street, sometimes referred to as the Newman Building. Same building where Guy Bannister had his headquarters, and Mancuso's restaurant was there, and the CRC had their offices, right? So he said, Mr. Newman, that is, stated that when the Cuban Revolutionary Council, that's the CRC, vacated the Newman Building, they failed to surrender the keys to their office, adding that they had several sets of keys to the office. He said that about 10 days or 2 weeks after the Cubans had moved out, he had occasion to visit the Newman Building one day, and on that occasion, he saw a young white man unlocking the floor to the office formerly occupied by the Cuban Revolutionary Council. Joe? He said he asked this fellow what he was doing, and he remarked that he was taking over the offices. Whereupon Mr. Newman told him that the office had been closed and that the Cuban Revolutionary Council no longer had office space in the building, and that he would have to vacate the premise immediately. He said there was no indications that the fellow had used the office previously. Mr. Newman described this individual as a white male, aged 22 to 24, about 5'9" and a half, about 165 pounds, fair complexion, light brown or blondish hair, and spoke with a Spanish accent, allegedly. So do you think this could possibly have been our boy, Lee Harvey Oswald?
Possibly, sure.
Now, if it was, reasonably being caught off guard by Mr. Newman, he possibly could have said, me no speaking no English, me no habla, me no speaking no English, man, Yeah. And guy could have said, he spoke with a Mexican accent or a Spanish accent. I don't know. It's interesting. If it was, the question becomes, who gave him the keys to the Cuban Revolutionary Council? Now, of course, the main suspects would be Sergio Arcacha Smith, Carlos Quiroga, some various other folks, Ernesto Rodriguez. Mr. Newman stated that when last seen, Sergio Arcacha Smith claimed to be selling life insurance now, The name Sergio Acosta is listed in the 1962 New Orleans City Directory with the address at 4523 Duplessis Street. Probably spelled that or said that wrong, but that's okay. His wife's name is known as Maurice, and his occupation is shown as clerk. The above address is located in a housing development known as Parkchester Apartments. Newman stated that during this interview that one Jack S. Martin, who lives at the corner of Esplanade Avenue and North Pryor Street, had brought Sergio Arcasius Smith and Carlos Quiroga to him and recommended them to him as prospective tenants to his building, Joe. So, our boy, Jack S. Martin, brings Arcasius Smith and Quiroga to 544 Camp Street. Wasn't that nice of him? He said that Martin had also brought to him Mayor Victor Shiro, who happened to be Carlos Quiroga's father-in-law. Remember, he married into the Shiro family.
Yes.
So Martin had also brought to him Mayor Victor Shiro, and it helped him to get a charter or permit to operate in New Orleans. He said that on one occasion, Quiroga appeared to have a shortwave radio transmitter that he was trying to repair. Like tinkering around with. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Don't worry, Zendar, you're not the only one. It's all good, brother.
Yeah.
Newman stated that he has not rented any offices to any new tenants in the Newman building or 544 Camp Street since September of 62, when the Cuban Revolutionary Council vacated, apparently. He could furnish no information as to why the rubber stamp impression FPCC 544 Camp Street, New Orleans, appeared in the booklet The Crime Against Cuba, which had been recovered from Oswald when he was arrested in New Orleans on August 9th, 1963. He don't know.
Yeah, of course. I mean, he's not going to admit that he leased it to whatever Lee was trying to do there.
Newman stated that someone phoned him about 3 months ago. Now, this interview was done on December 9th, 1963. So he's saying Newman stated that someone phoned him about 3 months ago, which would have been middle of September, coming up on 1963, and wanted to rent offices for night meetings and wanted to make an appointment to meet him. He said nothing ever transpired as a result of this telephone call. He also stated that about 4 or 5 months ago, another fellow, a white male, about 37 to 38, 5'11", medium build, olive complexion, dark eyes, dark brown hair, came to see him about renting an office which he wanted to use for night classes in Spanish. He said this office rented for $30 a month, and the subject paid him a $30 rental and came back the same weekend to see him. He said this fellow later told him that he had not recruited sufficient students and that he no longer wanted the space. He told Mr. Newman to keep the goddamn $30, which he had paid him as a rental on the space.
Huh.
Okay. Let's see.
Well, I'm pretty sure it wasn't Ernesto Rodriguez who ran the language school, Berlitz, that needed to rent rooms to teach whatever they were teaching there or meeting there.
Right. So during the late afternoon of December 2nd, reporting agent interviewed a Ronnie Kerr. Now, if you remember, Joe, the Ronnie Kerr dude was part of the Committee to Free Cuba. He was like their marketing and their advertising guy. Also part of the CRC.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've noticed, Rob, is all these people in these positions on the boards and spokespeople, they all had different positions in different type of organizations, right? Like they were all the same network. with different names,
Right.
which goes to the possible grift theory we talked about last week, and we will get into that in a little bit, I promise.
Let's see. Mr. Kerr stated that he seemed to recall Oswald applying for a job with his agency when he had offices at 704, 705 Segali Building, corner of Camp and Canal Streets in New Orleans. He said this was several months ago, and about the time Oswald had a radio debate over radio station WDSU in August of 63.
Yeah.
He said this was when he had seen Oswald, and for that reason, he could not be positive in identifying Oswald's autograph that he was the man he had in mind. Mr. Kerr could furnish no information R.E. Oswald using 544 Camp Street as an address. During the interview with Mr. Ronnie Kerr, he stated that Sergio Acasha may be wanted on a Dyer Act charge and that Acasha allegedly drove a car from New Orleans to Miami. So this dude's snitching already on his boy.
Bro.
But he sent him in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And you can't plan this well enough, and we didn't. But in the audio clip I will play in a little bit, Quiroga and Garrison brings up the fact that Sergio Acasha might have not been in New Orleans around that time. But then Garrison brings up, well, I have reports and witnesses he might have came back. We'll hear what Quiroga has to say about that.
Yeah. On December the 5th, a reporting agent interviewed a Mr. Robert DeVille, Director of Finance for the City of New Orleans. Also, Mr. Joseph Orlesh, Secretary to the Director of Finance, to determine whether the Fair Play for Cuba Committee had applied for any permits from the City of New Orleans to operate in New Orleans. It was found that this organization was not of record with the Director of Finance. So Lee never tried to get any permits.
Which does
December 6th.
That does not surprise me in one bit.
Right. December 6th, Special Agent in Charge Rice of the Secret Service inquired of FBI Special Agent Paul Alcor of New Orleans as to the results of any investigation which they may have conducted in an attempt to connect Lee Harvey Oswald with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee with the address 544 Camp Street. Alcor advised that they had checked this angle out thoroughly, but with negative results. The overall investigation with reference to Lee Harvey Oswald is being continued at New Orleans, and in the event any information is developed, which would place him at 544 Camp Street in New Orleans, it will be the subject of another report on its own. So at that point, they're still a looking.
Right.
Now, keep in mind, Joe, we're going to have some crazy dates here when you think about what's going on. So November 27th, 1963. This is 5 days after the assassination, 3 days after Oswald is shot dead in the basement. Carlos Bringuier. This is an FBI memorandum from Special Agent John Reynolds. And this is, again, November 27th, 1963. Carlos Bringuier of the Cuban Student Directorate, operator of the Casa Roca clothing store, 107 Decatur Street, advised that on August the 5th, Oswald came into his store and gave him a Marine guidebook stating he was an ex-Marine who could fight against Castro if needed and could help train guerrillas. He put his hand in his pocket as if to contribute money to the Cuban Student Directorate, but Bringuier says that he stopped him. He said, "Hold on, man. What are you doing? What you got in your pocket, bro?" And told him he could not accept any contributions. No. To the Cuban Student Director. No. Mr. Marine. No. I cannot accept any donations from you, sir. Oswald told him not to lie about it, that, quote, "we can infiltrate you," at which time Bringuier became suspicious of Oswald and would talk no more with him.
I have no idea who he means by we.
Well, it's in quotes that we, in quotes, can infiltrate you. And this is directly after he's saying, Oswald put his hand in his pocket and Bringuier is inferring that he was going to donate to the cause. And he stopped him. He said, no, mister. No. I cannot accept any donations. And Oswald's next line out of his mouth is, Oswald told him not to lie about it. Don't you lie about it. That you're not taking no money. We can infiltrate you anytime.
I have a couple problems with that, Rob. I don't think Bringuier would reject a donation. And you have to take into consideration what Bringuier and his friends were saying on the eve or on the night of the assassination and on the 23rd, and what propaganda they are skewing. So I think you have to look at it through that lens, right? This is coming from Bringuier.
Yes.
Okay.
He stated he again saw Oswald on August 9th when Oswald was arrested after Oswald tried to distribute Fair Play for Cuba Committee handbills on Canal Street. Bringuier again saw Oswald, he said, at Oswald's trial in municipal court August 12th, 1963, and then saw him at 6 p.m. on August 21st at the debate in which Oswald participated over radio station WDSU in New Orleans. Bringuier claims he has no information regarding anyone named Heidel, anyone named Jack Ruby or Jack Rubenstein, nor any other information regarding the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans. He stated that the two Anti-Casto Cubans arrested on August 9th with him in the altercation with Oswald had only that contact with Oswald. I think what he's trying to say is they had never seen him before either. Bringuier stated that he had learned from talking with Orestes Pena, his neighbor and proprietor of the Havana Bar at 117 Decatur Street, that Oswald was apparently in the bar, Joe, sometime between the 15th and 30th of August, 1963, with a Mexican individual, name not known. This Mexican was later seen in the bar with another Mexican. He also said that from talking with Pena, Oswald may have frequented the restaurant on the corner of Iberville and Decatur Streets. So there, you have Carlos Bringuier corroborating what Orestes Pena had been saying. And I don't know if they had been in touch with Orestes Pena this early, November 27th. So it corroborates what Orestes Pena said later. Because nobody ever tied them two together, Orestes Pena that early.
Right.
Yeah. Because, of course, the whole Orestes Pena story is that, he was working as an informant for Debris.
Right.
And that, Oswald had been in his bar several times with a Mexican in the company of Mexican or Mexicans. He tried to order a lemonade or something. Remember, the whole thing.
Yeah. But he was a valued, or at least he was a believed FBI informant. Pena.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like he's some random scafuza giving a statement to an informant. He was an informant.
Yes.
And I believe the two scafuzas with Bringuier were, oh my God, it's Celso Hernandez, who you talked about recently, right?
And Miguel Cruz.
Yes, Miguel Manuel Cruz. Yes. And yes, we will get into that soon. I bring that up because I'm hiding the lead here. So burying the lead, as they say.
Now, what's interesting is that Carlos Bringuier stated that he was the only member of the DRE in New Orleans. Not sure how much of a true statement that is.
I think he was the leading figure, like the spokesperson, for lack of a better word, in New Orleans for the DRE. I don't think he was the only one.
I don't think he was the only member either.
No,
but he told the FBI he was.
Well,
apparently.
right. Well, because you know very well, Rob, the FBI was clamping down on these guys in Miami and all over the place in Miami. I mean, no one can move in Miami, state and county orders, everything. So a couple of the people went to New Orleans to try to operate there and try to stay under the radar. Yeah.
And then this is all right. I found a little bit more from our Martin series, Joe.
Oh,
This is a little update for everybody.
love
I
it.
wish we'd have had this document back then because it goes into a lot more detail about one of our Jack Martins.
Ooh,
Yes.
this is new to me
Yes.
as the audience. Yeah, as well as the audience.
This is a Secret Service document that was written on December 4th, 1963. But it covers the period of November 22nd, 1963 to December 2nd. And it is a report done up by Special Agent Anthony Surretz and Special Agent Adrian Vial.
Huh. I don't know those names.
Well, you might know the special agent in charge. His name was John Rice.
Oh, yes.
Showed up on a lot of these New Orleans Secret Service documents, right?
Yep.
Now, these times, Joe, are insane. And I don't think we emphasized this much. So this document, like I said, written up by the Secret Service on December 4th, 63 states. And this is a synopsis of their investigation. Okay. And I'll just read the synopsis. So, and then we'll get into the details. Investigation at New Orleans disclosed that Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested by the New Orleans Police Department on August 9th, August 9th, 63, for having been involved in a brawl with 3 Cuban anti-Castroites while he was handing out literature in the 700 block of Canal Street that same date. The literature pertaining to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, which organization was supporting Castro. Oswald lived in a small apartment at 4907 Magazine Street in New Orleans from May 9th until roughly September 24th, 1963. His wife reportedly left a few days prior to Oswald allegedly going to Texas to have her second baby. A woman in the station wagon bearing a Texas license plate is said to have come to the Oswald apartment for the purpose of picking up Mrs. Oswald and driving her and her baby to Texas.
True.
Oswald remained in the apartment, but moved unexpectedly one night, owing about 10 days back rent. Now, here's the details of the investigation. At 1:40 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, Joe, what was happening in Dallas?
What's the time again?
1:40 p.m.
I mean, he's probably already got arrested around in the Texas theater.
Well, it's about that time. Like, all this shit is going on right about then.
The tippet was allegedly 1 p.m., but we know it was much later than that. A few minutes later.
No, it was allegedly 1:16 p.m.
Oh, that was time of death. Right. 1:10. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So roughly about 1:30, 1:40, Oswald is getting arrested in the Texas theater.
Yes.
Okay. So keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
At 1:40 p.m. on November 22nd, reporting agent received a long-distance telephone call from clerk Lillian Ryan of our Dallas office. So, the Dallas office of the Secret Service, not the FBI, the Secret Service, stated that she was calling at the request of Special Agent Robert A. Stewart of Dallas regarding an individual named Jack Martin, Route 1, Goldana, Louisiana, on whom Special Agent Stewart desired discreet inquiries conducted. At that time, Clerk Ryan indicated that she did not have any information regarding the said Jack Martin and did not know what connection, if any, he might have had with the shooting of President John F. Kennedy that same date at Dallas. So how in the Sam hell at 1:40 p.m., let's say roughly before or after, or right at the same time as Oswald is being arrested in Dallas, does somebody at the Secret Service office in Dallas requesting somebody in Louisiana from the Secret Service check out a guy named Jack Martin at a specific address? Route 1, Goldana.
The only plausible way to me is a tip, a call, or information from a CI.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, this is literally an hour after the assassination went down.
Mm.
I mean, keep that in mind as well. But if you had a tip, Joe, and you were it was about somebody in Louisiana, wouldn't you call the Louisiana office of the Secret Service and not the Dallas office, unless you were in Texas?
Unless you were in Texas, 100%. Yeah, in theory.
Interesting.
Very.
But that's not all, folks. Remember, keep these times in mind. At 2:06 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, Clerk Ryan again called the reporting agent, advising that at that time it was thought that possibly Jack Martin may have been the assassin of President Kennedy. At 2:06 p.m., an hour and a half after the assassination, she calls back and states that possibly Jack Martin may have been the assassin of President Kennedy. She could furnish no information regarding Jack Martin's description or background, knowing only that his address was reported at Route 1 in Goldana, Louisiana, and that it was desired that discreet inquiries regarding Martin be conducted at Goldana at once. Reporting agent immediately telephoned Special Agent in Charge John Rice, who happened to be on an official road trip to, guess where, Joe?
Someplace in Louisiana, possibly. The birth or the hometown of one of our favorite members, Mr. Trey. That would be Shreveport, possibly.
You got it, sir. He was on an official trip to Shreveport.
Wait, Rice was?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Guess who else was in Shreveport on November 22nd, 1963, Joe?
That would be General Walker.
Ding, ding, ding. You are 2 for 2 tonight, sir. You're killing it.
I'm on it. I know. I had some time to prepare, a couple extra minutes.
In the northwest section of Louisiana, approximately 325 miles from New Orleans. So they're a long way away from NOLA, baby. Goldana being located in the Natchitoches Parish, Joseph, in the northwest section of Louisiana. Natchitoches.
Wow. Don't say that. Make me say that 3 times.
No. Special Agent in Charge Rice was located at the Office of Special Investigations at Barksdale Air Force Base near Shreveport. And was
Trey's already on it. He already, before you even said that, he said Barksdale Air Force Base.
Bingo. And was informed of the above-mentioned request that discreet inquiries be conducted at once in Goldana regarding Jack Martin. It was explained to Rice that it was desired the results of the investigation at Goldana be telephoned immediately to the Dallas office of the Secret Service. So, at approximately 9:30 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, reporting agent received a telephone call at his residence from Special Agent in Charge Rice, who was calling from Natchitoches, Louisiana. Rice stated that he had conducted a discreet inquiry at Goldana regarding Jack Martin and had telephoned the results to Special Agent Robert Stewart in Dallas, and that during this telephone conversation, Stewart furnished the following information regarding one Lee Harvey Oswald, who had already been arrested in Dallas for having fired the shots which killed President Kennedy. So, nothing to see here, folks. We got our man, right? Lee Harvey Oswald, a white male, date of birth 10/18/39, at New Orleans, 5'9", 140 pounds, Social Security number 433-54-3739, chairman of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans, filed a change of address with the Post Office Department in Dallas on May the 15th, 63 to 4907 Magazine Street, New Orleans, and on or about 11/2/63, rented a P.O. box in Dallas. Special Agent in Charge Rice stated that it was desired that an immediate investigation be started in New Orleans in an effort to develop as much information as possible regarding Lee Harvey Oswald. Reporting agent immediately telephoned Special Agent Adrian Vile at his residence with request that he meet me at the office ASAP. Accompanied by Special Agent Vile, reporting agent called the New Orleans Police Department Bureau of Identification the night of 11/22, where we checked their records on Lee Harvey Oswald, whose address was shown as 4907 Magazine Street. The records showed Oswald's FBI number is 327925D. His FBI fingerprint return showed that his fingerprints had been contributed by the Marine Corps on October 24th, 1956. The records also reflected that Oswald had been arrested by the New Orleans Police Department on August 9th on a charge of disturbing the peace by creating a scene. The arrest was shown to have been made by Lieutenant Gaillot and other officers of the New Orleans Police Department, 1st District Police Station. Oswald's occupation was listed then as a mechanic. Now, there's a note at the bottom of this report here from Harold Weisberg that says, these two reports were called to my attention by Robert Richter. Jack Martin is the name of an associate of Guy Bannister, a former FBI agent who operated in New Orleans Detective Agency and was connected with many of the characters in the story of Oswald in New Orleans. The Jack Martin of these reports was an immediate suspect, may have been the assassin, in quotes. Once Oswald was arrested, all interest in Jack Martin as a suspect in the assassination disappeared. This matter is ignored in the report and in the testimony. Interesting.
Yeah,
So-
I have a couple thoughts here.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous for Jack Martin to get, let me use this term, dimed out at around 1:45, 1:40 before 2 o'clock on the 22nd.
By somebody who didn't know shit.
Do you think, what I was going to bring up is, do you think Martin thought he was possibly dimed out by Ferry, and that's why he, shortly after, gave up Ferry and told the authorities about him?
Well, if you remember, Joe, the original person who dimed out Jack Martin originally was a guy named Hardy Davis, W. Hardy Davis. He, as soon, and I wish I had that document in front of me with the times on it, but on November 22nd, 1963, he was diming out Jack Martin. And I don't know if it was because, well, no, that would have happened. The whole Bannister Martin thing would have happened the evening of the 22nd. after the assassination.
Yeah, or late afternoon, whatever.
Yeah, but I think it was the next day that Hardy Davis dropped a dime. But I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah.
But somebody,
and we've read that document before here. You have, yes.
Now maybe somebody called and tipped the Dallas office off that Jack Martin from Louisiana was involved in the assassination, right? And maybe that's all they said. Maybe this Jack W. Martin, who they wanted to check out in Goldana.
Bro, you took the words out of my mouth. Continue.
Maybe this guy was on some kind of a radar or watch list by the Secret Service, and when they checked their indices for a Jack Martin, this was the guy that popped up and not the guy in New Orleans. You see what I'm saying?
I that's 100% plausible to me. Possible. They didn't know exactly. I mean, how much trouble did we go through trying to figure out which Martins were which? 6 months? They had a couple hours, maybe, if that, a couple minutes.
Right. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. I could totally see, because it was the Secret Service who went out to check on the Jack W. Martin.
Right. Yeah, this whole thing is Secret Service.
Right, but that would make sense based on the tip they received.
Right. You know, a tip probably came into them, right? You know, they're not the FBI. They're not Dallas PD or New Orleans PD. They're their own entity, right?
Yeah, they don't have their own informants like the FBI
At
does.
this time, it's been an hour and a half after the assassination. You know, the FBI is crawling through their asshole trying to do something. The DPD's busy. You know, they still haven't caught a suspect, if you will, at this point.
Officially. Yeah.
So there's no way that Secret Service could have gotten, they didn't have time to get with the FBI or the Dallas PD before, you know, sending this back to New Orleans, you know, for Stewart in Dallas, be like, hey, you know, call New Orleans or call Louisiana and tell them to check on a Jack Martin. You know, we have here an address for Route 1 Goldana. Maybe this guy was a nut job who'd wrote letters to the, you know, to a president or threatened him in the past. And it just so happened because it's such a common name, Jack Martin, John Martin, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they thought it was this son of a bitch, you know?
I think it's a great explanation to what could have possibly happened. Cammie said, I know so many Martins around South Louisiana. They're as common as fleas.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir, Cammie.
Because this guy, so to follow up a little bit with that, because it's been a while, folks, since we did the Martin thing. And this is the Rice report. Mm-hmm. So he says approximately on 2 p.m. on November 22nd, while at Barksdale Air Force Base in Bossier City, Louisiana, I received a telephone call from Special Agent Anthony Garrett in New Orleans, and he advised that he had just received a telephone call from Lillian Ryan in Dallas, who stated that Robert Stewart had requested that this office conduct discreet inquiries relative to Jack Martin, Route 1, Goldana, Louisiana, who at the time was considered a possible suspect in the assassination of President Kennedy. No further info was then available to Clerk Ryan. So he says, I immediately proceeded to Goldana, arriving at approximately 5 p.m. and interviewed Mrs. Irene somebody, can't read it, the postmaster, and a Mr. G.C. Quarles, the rural carrier, and Willie Craner, constable and deputy sheriff, all of whom were well acquainted with Jack Martin, son of Ben and Thelma Martin of Route 1, Box 4, Goldana. The Martin family had resided in this area for a great many years. The family is poor and Ben Martin is a worker in the logging business in this backroads community. Jack Martin reportedly grew up in the community and did not finish high school. For several years, the subject has been traveling around the country and apparently has been connected with an unidentified religious cult.
The fake bishop cult.
It has been rumored, according to Mr. Quarles, that Martin desires to be a preacher.
That's the same Jack Martin, for sure.
It's not. But we'll get there.
Okay. It sounds like the Jack Martin that we know. That went to Kentucky, got the fake bishop thing, ferry, all that stuff we've talked about. Sorry.
Constable Frazier said that apparently Martin had never been in any trouble in Goldana or the vicinity, but he did leave the area about 8 or 10 years ago and was gone for several years. He said he had heard that he was either in the armed forces or possibly in prison in another state.
Or mental facility.
Martin reportedly had never married, and so far as known, he has never been officially employed or gainfully employed. He has communicated with his parents by mail from various places throughout the country and always uses a general delivery address. He reportedly has been in Massachusetts, New Jersey, California, Texas, and other states. Constable Frazier said he last saw Martin in Goldana approximately 3 or 4 weeks ago. Rural carrier Charles Quarles said that he believed that Martin's mother had been writing to him in Texas, city unrecalled recently. All the persons interviewed indicated that Martin is quiet and does not have any close friends in the area. He apparently does not hunt, he does not fish, and is not interested in sports. There was no indication that he had a gun or a rifle. He is said to be neat in appearance and rather soft-spoken. Constable Frazier said that a brother of Bobby Martin, aged 19 years, has been a problem in the community. Jack Martin is described as follows: white, male, 25 to 30, 5'6" to 5'8", 150 pounds, dark eyes, dark hair, olive complexion, stocky build. So this is not the same guy in New Orleans, Joe. This is not Jack Martin.
Okay.
At Natchitoches, Louisiana, inquiries were made at the sheriff's office and no record for Jack Martin was located. At approximately 9 p.m. on November 22nd, I contacted Robert Stewart and furnishing him the results of the investigation. That's when he advised me that Lee Harvey Oswald had been arrested in Dallas in connection with the assassination. He said that Oswald, who was connected with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans, had filed a change of address, blah, 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 blah. I contacted Sergeant Garrett by telephone at his residence at 9:30 p.m. on 11/22/63 and requested that he and Vile conduct a media investigation, which they did in New Orleans. So I just thought that little additional tidbit on our Jack W. Martin and how he somehow came on the radar at 1:40. Now, actually, it was earlier than that because obviously he had to come on the radar. John Rice was contacted at 1:40. So these people had to gather the information, figure out what to do with it, and then dispatch this call at 1:40. So obviously, Jack Martin's name is being mentioned in connection with the assassination in Dallas less than an hour after the assassination. Safe to say.
Yeah.
And whatever it was reported to the Dallas Secret Service office, not the FBI, not Dallas PD, Secret Service.
Yeah. And you fooled me, Rob. I was thinking you were going towards Jack S. Martin, of course, Edward Suggs, but
No.
And I just wanted to bring this up since you Just mentioned it. This is from our Jack W. Martin folder, right? A suspect in the assassination prior, in capital letters, to arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald on 22nd, 63, son of and Thelma, just like you said, white male, preacher. Did you just read this? But it's exactly what we have in our files on Jack W. So it does seem like it's a weird coincidence, Rob, because we know Jack S. Martin, William Suggs, private investigator for Bannister, allegedly had some some interaction with Oswald, which, of course, if you go back to the JFK movie, not saying you can take that as Bible, but, I could write a book about the things I've seen here this summer, right? Paraphrasing. They were after some Jack Martin on the 22nd. That's for sure.
Yep. And again, you had Jack Martin introducing Sergio Acosta and Quiroga prior to 1961, introducing them to Sam Newman and getting them their office space at 544 Camp Street. You can't make this shit up. It could have been anybody in New Orleans showing these guys where to rent office space anywhere in New Orleans, but it was Jack Martin, and it happened to be where Guy Bannister had his office, of course. So out of all the people and all the places, there's another coincidence, folks. Just saying.
Something makes me think that initial tip with Jack W. Martin might have been possibly even more relevant, because he mentioned the Fair Play for Cuba committee, right? You said?
Yeah.
How would he know about that? This random guy. Was he a couple 100 miles outside of New Orleans? I know they had to drive a long way to him. Jack W.
Don't know, bro.
How does he know about the Fair Play for Cuba committee? That is...
Well, I don't think he knew it at that time. I mean, it was when he got back when it was 9:30 that night after Oswald's arrest, when he called to report that he had found nothing, that he had done his discreet investigation of this Jack Martin, if you will, and found nothing. That's when the guy in Dallas told him, "Oh, don't worry about it. That we arrested somebody named Lee Harvey Oswald." But apparently he's got a bunch of bullshit going on in New Orleans, including the Fair Play for Cuba committee nonsense. He was arrested on, blah, blah, blah. Go back to New Orleans and do an investigation on Lee Harvey Oswald. Just forget all about Jack Martin.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Wow. That is a good find, sir. That is a really good find.
Interesting tidbits from New Orleans. So, Joe, let's get into some more shite from New Orleans.
Yes, let's do it. And you know what, Rob? I'm going to play a couple seconds of you.
Of me?
Of you.
Little old me?
Little of you. Less than about 48 hours ago. And this is going to lead into what I'm going to talk about, Carlos Quiroga and some possible grifting that was going on in New Orleans that, of course, you went over last week, and it was a really interesting theory, and I've been thinking about it all week. And I had left for my hockey game by the time you went over this document, so I'm just going to play like 1 minute of it, and then have it segue into my segment here.
Interesting. Now, the reason I find these groups interesting, and like I said, I would kind of tie it into the grift, right? So I came across a Crusade to Free Cuba bulletin for its members. Okay. Now, this bulletin is a call to arms. An office for the Crusade to Free Cuba will be maintained and established in Gallier Hall, second floor, Old City Hall, Monday, January 15th through Friday, January 19th, for the purpose of handing out workers' kits for the citywide solicitation. So what they are gearing up to do is a fundraising drive, a city-wide New Orleans fund drive. You are urged to pick up a worker's kit and other information from this headquarters during the period so that you can participate in the citywide drive. The drive captain's meeting will be held at 10:30 a.m. on Monday, January 15th. You are urged to attend if you are a drive captain. Volunteer workers meeting at 10:30 a.m. Friday, January 19th. You are urged to attend if you would like to be involved in this fund drive. You are urged to attend. There will be a parade at 11 a.m. on Canal, starting at Canal and Elks Place on Saturday, January 20th. The citywide drive will take place on Saturday, January 20th and Sunday, January 21st. Volunteer workers are urgently needed. Please pick up your kits and secure as many of your friends as possible to help. Turning in collections. Collections should be turned in to drive captains or directly to collection headquarters or Grimadar at 811 and have them call.
Okay, so you were talking about additional possible grifts and the Cuban Freedom Council there doing like a parade in the through New Orleans gathering money. So that made me think, what if Oswald, based on his history and his past legend, if you will, what if he tried to corner possibly the pro-Castro side of that? As in New Orleans in 1963, as we're going to read in a second, there were so many different Cuban exile and right-wing and freedom organizations, and I'm going to get into a couple more in a second. It would make sense if Oswald realized, well, he's out of a job at this point. What if I use my background to, make money and get money from the pro-Cuban side?
And that is an excellent point, Joe, because like you just said, there's so many anti-Castro Cuban groups fundraising that, they're all like drowning each other out. Like one can't take over. Mm-hmm. People aren't going to contribute to 5 different anti-Castro organizations. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there wasn't a pro-Castro organization at the time in New Orleans. So it is a good idea that Oswald may have had the idea to go pro-Cuba because, hey, he knows a lot about it. He knows a lot about Castro. He lived in communist Russia for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
He was just banking on them nobody ever finding out that, before that, he was in the Marine Corps for 3 years.
Yeah.
Serving his country proudly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're right. And when we went over some of the letters that he wrote during the summer of 1963 last week, what did he ask for every single time? Free literature.
Yeah, free literature.
What can you do if you possibly sell literature or give it out for free, but then charge a membership? It's a kind of a scam. And
the literature is the worm. If you're fishing, the literature is the worm, right?
Right.
The fish are the people you want to hook that you could potentially make money off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you throw enough worms out there, something's going to bite, and then you reel them in. You know, you blow a bunch of hot air up their ass about what you're going to do and da-da-da-da-da, so that they feel comfortable enough to join your organization or contribute to it. I mean, look, folks, and we'll get more into this after Joe's done, but it wasn't just the anti-Castro Cubans doing this. You remember what Lauren Hall and Jerry Hemming were doing? They were doing the same thing. But they were fishing in a very small pond for big fish. The Cubans are doing it in a very big pond with a bunch of small fish. Small money. Okay? Now, if your educated white guy mind is thinking, okay, I can do this, but how can I do it bigger and better? When you have access to people like General Walker, Lester Logue, all these big money investors, Dr. Stanley Drennan in California, you've got big money backing these causes because they've bought in and believed in it.
Mm-hmm.
We know, Lauren Hall and Hemming at different times met with General Walker to obtain funding for raids on Cuba, promising something that they would never deliver.
Yeah, and Vidal Santiago in November of 1963 was at General Walker's.
It's all a big grift. Why do you think? And I was reading through, and again, this I come into play a little bit later, but I read an interview or a report from the FBI about, because they were trying to figure out who the hell went to see Sylvia Odio, right?
Right.
Of course, Lauren Hall's name popped up. Lawrence Howard's name popped up. William Seymour's name popped up.
Yes, sir.
Celio Castro Alba's name pops up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're saying, Lawrence Howard was working at the time for an electric company, and he said that Hall came to him, and wanted him to go to Florida with him, or via through Dallas, through New Orleans, eventually to Florida, blah blah blah. And at the time, Howard was married and had 2 daughters. So if you have a job and you're providing for your family, and some nut job, according to him, comes to you and says, hey man, why don't you ride with me across the country? And along the way, we're going to make some stops, and then we're going to train in Florida to go attack Castro in Cuba with a bunch of our friends.
Doesn't seem worth the risk.
What in your right mind is saying that's a good idea? Unless the pitch is much different. Unless the pitch is, hey, man, you know me, I'm a good shit talker. Me and you, man, we can convince these people that we're really going to do something. We can bilk them out of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I got the contacts for these guys. I got the contact for this guy, big money. All we got to do is show up, talk to him, get him to write us a check. We are golden type of thing.
Yeah.
They're all doing it. They're all doing it. None of these anti-Castro Cubans are legit planning on going back on a gunboat to Cuba to try to fight Castro.
Few of them are. Few of them do.
They're all scared to death of Castro.
Yeah.
They know he's a freaking madman. They know they'll kill your family, whoever's back in Cuba, if you even try something.
Yeah, that operation, sinking one ship or taking out one guard post is not going to take out Castro.
No way.
Because you can get a small win. You can get a small win at best.
When Carrego was talking to Garrison, and Garrison was trying to convince him to testify at the grand jury hearing against Clay Shaw with what he knew, he said, "Look, man, I'm afraid they're going to kill my father and mother who are still in Cuba." He didn't want to be identified in FBI reports because he was worried about his family back in Cuba.
Mhm.
These guys aren't hopping on any gunboats or rafts or anything else with some shitty ass rifles and a couple of bottles of aspirin and heading to Cuba to try to kill Castro. They're not doing it. But they're raising money with the promise of doing it.
Yeah.
Somewhere down the road, and that day never comes.
For sure. That day did not come. So one of the thoughts I had, Rob, and let me bring up my little, because I actually wrote this down. Like you mentioned, Oswald's FPCC grift, if you will, ended or was exposed after the August 21st or whatever it was thing with Bringuier 16th. I can't remember. Right? He leaves New Orleans about a month later. But what if whatever happened in Mexico City, and we touched on this a little on members only, but Mexico City is a huge rabbit hole. What if that was the last ditch attempt to use Lee's possible pro-Castro legend to get something out of it, whether it's get him into Cuba or the plotters had their own agenda, like let's make sure Lee goes and meets with Kostakov or maybe gets him going in and out of the Russian and Cuban embassy. Of course, we know that those pictures never surfaced. We know the audio tapes were almost certainly an impersonation. I think, Rob, and I've given a lot of thought of this over the past week, there were grifters on both sides, 100%. I think, and like Oswald and Ferry, right? And our boy who we end off every show with, Dino, right? Grifter, right? Lawyer for the Scafuzas in New Orleans, right? The the homosexual, people. What if Oswald, being the grifter that he was, got himself into trouble, right, doing his grifting, but might have gotten intertwined with the most dangerous grifters, which were Ernesto Rodriguez, Carlos Bringuier, Emilio Rodriguez,
and Lauren Hall.
Look, yeah. What if he was grifting too hard and actually came up against actual grifters? I'm saying everyone Oswald came in contact with in New Orleans in 1963 was a CIA or FBI asset or informant. Everyone.
It's all about the money, all the time.
Yeah, but I'm saying, I think these people,
to your point, Joe, the grift, is what you're saying, turns into something else.
Right. That's exactly
and
what I'm saying.
Lauren Hall himself mentions it in an interview. He said we were there in Lester Logue's office, talking about, raising money for going to fight Castro. And somebody threw out a number saying, I'd put $50,000, in a kitty to go kill President Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, one grift possibly outweighs another. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you can promise to do that, then your grift just changed and becomes a whole lot more serious in what you plan on delivering. And somehow it came true. It wasn't just a grift anymore, but possibly it grew to something out of your hands, like this specific instance. Like maybe somebody got wind of the grift.
Yeah. JM Wave, maybe.
And backdropped, this grift into a real life scenario.
An operation within an operation. Operation within a grift.
Just saying, it's this thing can get crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. I think that's why we struggle so much to figure out what the hell was going on in New Orleans in 1963. Right? Oswald, was he Was he playing? Was he trying to, get communists out for Bannister? Or was he actually, it goes so deep, and there's so many levels of back and forth and espionage. And
to the level that Oswald was being out and about, he was handing out these pamphlets on the docks, to Navy guys.
Right, getting off the ship.
Yeah, getting off the ship. They didn't catch him on video every time he's handing the leaflets out. You know what I'm saying? He did it the day he got arrested. He did it a week later in front of the building Clayshaw worked in.
Yeah.
In front of the Trade Mart on the corner.
Yeah.
He could have done it possibly other times we don't know about. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, at least once in Dallas, I think, too, but before he went to New Orleans as well, allegedly.
Yeah. There's no proof that he did it in Dallas. That's the thing. Because I mentioned there's somebody asked if he had written any letters to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee after he went back to Dallas after Mexico City, and the answer is no. I told you all the shit stopped at the end of August.
Yeah.
It all just stopped.
Yeah, and when I brought it up last week, we showed a couple letters that were forwarded to the Communist Party. That guy Arnold. And I think he might have wrote maybe the Russian embassy or Cuban embassy or both, or trying to get Marina back. But in terms of the FPCC, I don't think that continued after New Orleans.
No.
So a possible Grift attempt was over, but did Oswald
exposed in New Orleans on TV?
Did he get exposed and get intertwined with the wrong type of people who have the connections with, say, Ernesto Rodriguez, his brother, a legendary CIA agent, Emilio Rodriguez? Did he get intertwined with the type of people who you don't want to grift with, and then was framed?
Well, look, we know later, the following year, following the assassination, Carlos Bringuier is on tour with General Walker, speaking at right-wing events, talking all about Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah. I mean, they tried to use it for sure, and both the Cuban exiles and the far right were very intertwined as well, for sure, as we know. So, very, very hard to tell what's going on, but I want to read a paragraph or two from the Oswald puzzle there, Rob.
Oh, yes.
Of course, by Larry Hancock and David Boylan. And if you are listening to this and you have not ordered it, I know almost all of our members have, you are missing out, because this is probably the best book on Oswald out there. You might not like everything it says in it, but it's amazingly researched. So I'm going to read a paragraph called Tightrope Walking, and it talks about Oswald in New Orleans and his activities. I'm going to hold this up for Larry and David. Actually, no, because the sound. The Warren Commission gave relatively little attention to Oswald's activism in New Orleans as part of its presentation of his character, possibly because it did not fit the picture it was painting. His demonstrations for the FPCC were organized and mild-mannered. When angrily approached by anti-Castro Cubans, he remained non-confrontational and refused to become violent. In his media appearances on radio and in a broadcast debate, he came across as literate, well-spoken, and not aggressive in his beliefs. He was invited to give a speech on his experiences in the Soviet Union, I think, to Tulane, and his remarks were informed, structured, and well-received. The commission may also have preferred not to deal with the conflicts and seeming chaos of Oswald's activism in New Orleans in late July '63, which saw Oswald walking a tightrope between two violently opposed political factions. From that point on, his activities in New Orleans appear so chaotic that he himself seem to be living in different dimensions. The explanation for much of that mystery is that in pursuit of his new activism, Oswald was doing exactly that. One of those dimensions was the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and his tightrope walking with the FPCC limited both his relationship with its leadership and support he was able to receive from the committee. His initial efforts related to the FPCC had involved letters, a request for literature, and likely one short-lived public demonstration in Dallas. Once in New Orleans, his correspondence with the FPCC turned into a proposal to form a chapter there and to rent an office. We know where. The FPCC response was discouraging, and we read this letter last week, Rob. It's noted that there was little popular support for the Castro regime in that area. That would be the New Orleans area, and opening a physical office was not advisable. That was good advice. If anything, New Orleans' Cuban scene was about anti-Castro advocates and activities. In late July and early August, Oswald would have found the local newspapers featuring stories about anti-Castro Cuban volunteers coming from Miami for military training and an FBI raid against anti-Castro partisans who had collected a cache of explosives from a location outside the city. So he's saying this was in the paper for a bombing mission against Cuba. In the FBI raid on the explosive stash, several anti-Castro fighters from the Miami area, primarily associated with the DRE, had joined an ambitious plan to assemble a large quantity of bombs and stage a two-plane bombing raid on Cuba.
Two planes.
Sorry? Planes?
Two planes?
Two planes, yes. A two-plane bombing raid on Cuba. That's how much explosives they had bought.
Was this David Ferry riding over in a Cessna throwing a grenade out of the fucking window?
We'll get there, I promise. Surplus bomb cases were purchased. Dynamite was bought from a source in Illinois, and it was carried to a rural area outside New Orleans, Lacombe, Louisiana. Money for the materials had come from, remember this name, Mike McClaney, a former Havana casino operator. And in late July, the materials were stored in a trailer near Lake Pontchartrain, Louisiana. Okay. One of the Cubans involved, a pilot who had been taken to Louisiana to assess the bombs, was not impressed by the explosive materials and opted out of the plan. Now, Larry doesn't say who this is. I wonder if that's, wasn't Pedro Diaz-Lanz a pilot?
A lot of people said they were pilots back then.
Yeah, true. Him or his brother were. So
again, they probably worried more about the bomb blowing their fucking plane out of the air than being able to drop it. It's
well,
not
we'll
like
see how
airplanes equipped with like belly bays that could open up and drop a bomb out. You know what I'm saying? They had to open a door and throw this damn thing out, or a window or something, you know?
Yeah, like B-52 bombers, where the thing like opens up and the bombs come out.
Yeah, that's not what they had.
Yeah.
They had like Cessnas and Beechcraft. You know what I mean? Like,
let's throw explosives out of a propped airplane is probably what the plan was. So this gets me back, and this is, I'm making a point here. This gets me back to the grift, because this guy, Mike Mulcahy, a former casino operator in Havana, Cuba. Now, that makes me think, why would a former, as in he doesn't have his job anymore as a casino operator in Cuba, want to support these raids? Allegedly, he's rich. Because he lost his money stream. That's why. And you could line him up with Santo Trafficante and all the other mafiosos and that lost money when Castro kicked them out of the prisons. A massive amount
of other marks. You know, you go to these guys, but look, you know, Castro kicked you out. You lost all this money. You know, support us. We're going to go get this motherfucker. We're going to go kill him.
Yeah, yeah. We'll get back your profits. You'll be back managing the casino in no time, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. So a massive amount of material, 48 cartons of dynamite alone, plus other bomb-making materials had been involved, but none of it was appropriate for building actual aerial bombs. This is where the grift comes in. You're soliciting some rich dude, be like, we're going to bomb Cuba, but you have some scafuza somewhere else in the country, Illinois, I got this dynamite, but it doesn't even work from the air, right? What are you doing with the rest of that money? Well, you're pocketing it for your other needs. Anyways, the FBI ended up raiding and confiscating the collection and relocating the dynamite and bomb-making materials to a military storage depot for explosives. News of the raid appeared in the headlines in the New Orleans papers on August 6th, 1963. That is 3 days before the fracas. Ultimately, no federal laws have been broken. Shocker. So no legal actions were taken against any of the Cubans involved. Shocker. Separately, reports of Cubans arriving for anti-Castro military training had been provided to the local FBI office from its own existing sources. That activity involved Cubans traveling to the area for basic training prior to being relocated to Nicaragua for what they believed to be military actions against Cuba. So they're recruiting anti-Castro Cubans, and they're saying, we're going to train you, send you to Nicaragua for an eventual attack on Cuba. I'm sure you can guess if that happened or not, Rob.
Yeah. There was a lot of these promises made. And sometimes when it came down to go time, in Florida, they got shut down right as they're trying to leave. And
right. By the FBI.
We know now Robert K. Brown was an FBI informant. I wouldn't trust Jerry Hemming as far as you could throw him.
Sturgis, maybe.
Dropping a dime on things. Getting money to do this stuff is the easy part. Actually getting on a boat and going to do this shit, that's the hard part. I mean, look what happened to poor Vidal.
Yeah.
Who actually got on a boat and tried to do this shit.
Yeah.
He got blown the fuck up before he even reached the shore.
Yeah, 1964, I think, sometime.
And he's a serious operator.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
This wasn't easy. This wasn't for the faint of heart or
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. It's just insane. Or they would get so far and see that, that Castro had boats out in the water, and they would just turn around and come back and wouldn't attack.
Or Rob, let me put this out to you. Throw this out there. What if you are an anti-Castro Cuban, you are an FBI informant, and you're also getting money from these rich scafuzas, right? What better way to give an excuse than be like, hey, bro, sorry, we were raided as we were planning to launch the operation. Here's the news. Here's the news article about what they confiscated.
Yeah, we almost made it.
Yeah, we almost got there, bro.
Next time, I promise you, we'll get there. We just need a little bit more funding. So buy more guns. They took all our guns. We got to replenish our supplies. It's all just a constant money grab grift on both sides of the fence.
I think so. Does that not make sense, though? Right? If you're an FBI informant and you're talking to some rich scafuza, and you're like, hey, we're going to go do this, but then you just tip off your own contact that you're doing it, everything gets confiscated, and you have plausible deniability. Hey, man, I was arrested. They gave me a conferred or stay in county notice, whatever. It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I thought of this after last week. So, Ruby, don't bark. Erica just came home. Anyways, so a couple more paragraphs. Shh. She's an earshot. Initially, more than a dozen volunteers were recruited in the Miami area by the Christian Democratic Movement, the CDM, but they're called the MDC, spelled backwards. So, you're talking about CRC, DRE, MDC, Jury, Alpha 66. They're all competing against each other here. The Christian Democratic Movement, for what they were told, was military trainings outside the United States. The initial recruits were paid to travel to New Orleans and housed a rather rundown rural property to do some very physical and very basic training over the 2 weeks. While the MDC and the Cubans involved believed they were being prepared for military activity, the organizer of the camp, Ricardo Davis, had obtained his initial funding from investors who had started a business in Guatemala, a lumber and mineral corporation. And their position was that Davis was simply recruiting people to cut mahogany trees, not to invade Cuba, to cut trees in Nicaragua.
Of course.
When the Cubans found out about this, they all quit. Oh, man. They were outraged and refused to continue, leaving them with no money at loose ends and ultimately contacting refugee aid groups for support. So they brought in all these Cubans. They said, you're going to Cuba. And then it's figured out that they were actually just going to cut trees in Nicaragua.
All this shit is coming like off of the church model, if you will. Okay.
Explain the church model.
Well, some people, and this might piss some people off, but the church model has a message to give you. And, depending on how you make people feel in that church, they're more inclined to give you money. Right? Then you have the whole priest or preacher model done in New Orleans by folks like David Ferry, Jack Martin, who pretend to be these fake bishops and preachers and this, that, and the other with these churches, in quotes, that they try to raise money for. Right? This, we learned this from Thomas Beckham and how all this all works. Beckham was nothing but a con man as well.
Yeah. 1,000,000%.
Even hell, Jack Ruby's selling fucking twist boards at the county fair. You know what I mean?
Another con man.
It's all a grift.
Is this why everything is so confusing in this case? It might be. Because you're just dealing with scafoozas and grifters.
Yeah, it's one scheme to another. Okay, we built the bishop priest thing for what it's worth. We can sell fake diplomas and fake certificates, and that's all good and fine until we get caught. This, that, and the other. I pretend to be a country singer. And Jack Ruby's like trying to adopt a little black kid from Chicago and be his manager and make money off this kid's back.
Going to New Orleans to get strippers.
If one club don't work, hey, we'll open another one. We'll change the name. I'll borrow money from this guy and that guy, and you be my silent partner. And it's all just a giant scheme until you're in over your ass. And Sally had a really good idea, Joe. Look at this.
Sure.
So could they have been found out and made to commit the assassination to pay off a grift? You see what I'm saying? Like they got money from the wrong people and who were pissed and said, you're going to do this or you're dead. We'll kill you and you can't hide.
That's an interesting idea.
Think if you were the sucker who got suckered in by a grift, right? People made promises to you that you bought and paid for. You contributed to the cause. And these things never come to fruition. And you might get pissed off enough to say, all right, look, if it comes down to it, you guys ain't going to do this shit, then you need to do this or you're done.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good idea. It's a damn good idea, Sally.
I like it, Sally. I like it. I think, and this is just like a working theory, uh, and it's only a week old. I think Oswald was grifting with people like Ferry and Dean Andrews and the rest of the New Orleans Cafuzas, maybe some Dallas Cafuzas, and he happened to stumble into the wrong grift. And that would be of the CIA and the FBI, really serious anti-Castro Cubans. And you brought up a point last week, Rob, and I didn't get a chance to mention this because I was going to hockey, of why would these anti-Castro Cubans, who are getting paid a lot of money from the CIA and other agents, and they have freedom, why would they risk their life going out on a boat thing, right? On like a, quote, suicide mission or something that's not very likely to succeed.
Right. Well, I mean, you got organizations, if you will, like the DRE, who didn't really promise raids on Cuba and things like that. They were raising money to send back to Cuba, for the people that were left behind, the people that had nothing, the people that Castro took everything from, and these poor families can barely have enough money to eat, and da 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 da. They're having parades down the middle of Canal Street with carrying these giant flags and people throwing money in them. They're sending teams out all over the city of New Orleans to stand on street corners and solicit money for these causes, right? Depending what the cause is. How do you know if Carlos Bringuier, supposedly the only, in quotes, DRE member in New Orleans, is going to send back any of this money to Cuba?
Right.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
Or
as much as he said he would send, he might keep 80% of it for himself. Or for
who knows?
Right. Who knows? I'm saying I have no idea.
A grift.
They all had their own personal agendas, and just my gut feeling is that Oswald might have ran into people that were actually a couple people that really saw an opportunity. And I think it probably came in a jam wave in addition to what New Orleans, their assets were telling them, and really really screwed him over.
Let's think about this for a second, Joe. So if you're a Cuban exile, right?
Yeah.
In the United States, you're in a different country. All right. What are the chances of you getting a decent job here if you barely speak any English?
Not well, unless you're working under other Cuban exiles.
Right. Or you open your own business.
Or you work for a 3-letter agency.
Right. So that model, Oswald, could have seen the model of what these guys are doing to make money. He's probably thinking in his head, how do these assholes, these Cuban exiles from another country, come to my country and make a better living than I do? And I was born here. I fought for this country.
Yeah. I could see him having that view 100%.
And seeing what they do, he's not stupid. We know that. And he's seeing the grift. He's seeing what they're doing. He might not know a lot of their funding comes from the CIA. He just sees the spoils. How does this guy own a clothing store in New Orleans when he just got here a year ago?
Mm-hmm.
And he barely speaks any English. You know what I mean? Like, something doesn't make sense here. And with what we know that Bannister was doing in New Orleans, we know he was, keeping track of communists and files on these guys.
Right.
Oswald was so out there doing what he's doing. He was even pointed out to Bannister at one point. Like, some guys down here handing out flyers, pro Castro, and he laughed about it.
Yeah.
If he was legit, Bannister would have been all over this guy like flies on shit with a file this thick, sending guys out to watch him. and report back. You know what I mean? Like, keep an eye on this guy. He's like really trying to do something here. Keep an eye on this guy. But if Bannister had an inkling that it's all bullshit, then he would have laughed about it. He wouldn't have been worried about what Oswald was doing. You know, he's just another Scafuza hustler, New Orleans hustler kid trying to get by like everybody else.
Yeah. I have this guy's file. He's a joke, laughing. LOL.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just something I've been thinking of, and I think James said it great. I highlighted it earlier. We might be really onto something. I mean, we don't know. We're just kind of spitballing here, and that's why we appreciate.
It's an angle. It's another angle that's never really been explored. And like we tried to explain the other night, you know, when you tie it into stories of Oswald growing up in New Orleans and being a hustler and being around the dregs of society in New Orleans in his formative teen years, with a mother who's not around, with no brothers around anymore because they've already left and joined the armed services. Oswald has a lot of time to himself in his teen years, you know, 13, 14, 15 in New Orleans, living in Exchange Alley, living next to a hustler hideout, whorehouse, whatever you want to call it. You know, there's been reports that, you know, hey, $20 is $20. You know, it is what it is for somebody who is not making a lot. You know,
couple $100.
I mean, you know, I doubt his mom's giving him any money for things. You don't want to be that poor kid in school, you know, and this, that, and the other. But yeah,
just had the type of hustler mindset. Yeah, I completely agree. James, how many grifters in the Garrison investigation? We lost count, but we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah. More than none.
Yeah. And Tiny goes, now's yous can't leave. And you won't get this reference. This is one of the references I will get that you won't, Rob. This is from The Bronx Tale. Robert De Niro and Chaz Palminteri, a big Italian movie. When they locked the bikers in the bar. And Sally got it, though. I respect that. I love that film, Tiny. Best scene. I saw a clip of it today. Talk about the Matrix. And yeah, so and what we talked about on we're not going to go too much into this. The only file that the CIA is currently not allegedly in the process of turning over to the Task Force Hottie 1 Luna Committee is the George Joanides file.
Well, the CIA is a bunch of con artists.
I agree.
It's what they do. It's called they give it a different name. It's called propaganda. But that's the fancy name. Otherwise, it's a grift. It's a con. It's propaganda. It's making people believe in something they wouldn't normally believe in. To do things they wouldn't normally do. Whoa, Gary Peters.
Oh,
super chat. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let's see what he says here.
Yeah.
John, Bobby, and King all killed in the span of 2. Everything points to the right. And if you don't think the mob was right-wing back then, think again. Oswald apparently had plenty of right-wing ties as well. Yeah, Gary. I mean, listen, we've talked about this a lot before. The mob was kicked out of Cuba. Havana was Las Vegas before Las Vegas. When Castro took over, they couldn't run the casinos anymore. So you have the right wing being all anti-communist. You have the mafia just caring about profits and getting back into Cuba. And you have the Cuban exiles just caring about getting rid of Castro and making Cuba free again. All of these elements were intertwined. 1,000,000%.
It didn't take much convincing for the CIA and Johnny Rosselli to convince Santos Traficante that it'd be a good idea to go back and kill Castro, and our government approves. We just need you to have one of your guys do it. Here's some pills. Go kill him.
Yeah. I left out the biggest other element, which of course was the CIA, who was not very happy with communist country being 90 miles off the shore. And and that's how a lot of these elements came together. And gun to my head right now, I think some milieu of these four were responsible for the assassination. That is my working theory.
Yeah, a lot of horse's assery going on back then.
Right. All right. So let's see, Rob. We are 150 in. I'm like halfway through my shit. I have a couple clips of Carlos Quiroga and Jim Garrison. Not many, maybe less than 5 minutes. What do you think?
Well, just hit the high points.
Yeah,
the highest points.
The highest points. Yes, I usually hit those, Rob, as we know. All right. And guys, this is not the best audio. I picked out the audio that was the clearest, but take a couple seconds away from the chat and really listen is my recommendation here. All right.
And turn it up.
Mr. Gasson?
You talk about Guy Vance at 6'3", I don't know, anyhow. He may have had some, I don't know. But that I know of, no. That he was wearing 6'3" in his office, I don't know, man.
Do you know if he knew Lee Harvey Oswald?
Guy?
No, Davis.
The only people who ever had any contact with Oswald was myself and Carlos Bringuier.
So if you heard that, Rob, he said the only person Oswald had contact with was me and Carlos Bringuier.
Yeah.
So I think they're kind of keeping the circle close here.
Well, yeah, they're definitely leaving people out.
And bro, at the end of this, I'm not going to get into this. Garrison offers Quiroga a spot as an investigator. And I think Quiroga was one of the ones that allegedly obstructed his investigation, right? Maybe pointed them away from the Cubans and the DRE, all that stuff.
He did not want to help because he was worried about his family back in Cuba being killed. If word got out about anything that he's doing over here like this, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. In the end of this, there's Garrison makes like a 5-minute pitch of we could pay you this per week and this and that. It's really hard to make out. But let me go through the other part where he asks about Oswald really quickly, and I'm going to mute as I have to skip.
Those are the only people that had contact,
Gas.
All right, here we go.
The crap by the missile fighters, and all this stuff. I was I sold him out. I mean, I sold him myself out to him as being one of his men. And one of the reasons why I could have checked my background all he wanted.
if I told you that all of these things that Oswald told you were merely a cover and that he was not anti-Castro at all?
Well, he sure was surprised, man. He meant more for that,
Garrison is asking Kuroga, what if everything Oswald told you was a cover? Like, what if he wasn't actually pro-Castro? And he goes, that would surprise me. And just a couple more seconds here, Rob, and they'll get your response.
Then you and I don't be in the opposite side.
Would it surprise you if I told you that Oswald had been to the training camp north of the lake? In the summer of 63. Would that surprise you?
I guess so.
You said Arcacho left town in early 62. Suppose I told you that we had statements of witnesses placing him here in the summer of 63. Would that be a surprise?
Yeah, because I'll tell you one thing, if he was in 63, and he never even called me or contact, for example, Orlando Piedra, you know Orlando Piedra, he used to be the chief of the Bureau of Investigation of the Justice Society.
How does he spell it last name?
Piedra, P-I-E-R-D-A. Excuse me, Piedra.
Piedra?
Yeah, Piedra. P-I-E-D-R-A.
What was his first name?
Orlando. And,
Does he still live here?
no, in fact, by the way, that's the person who I wrote a letter about see if he knew where Arcacho was now.
In other words, he was very close to Arcacho.
Who?
Piedra.
No, he was not close to Arcacho, but he had heard from some relatives he has in Houston that Arcacho was in Houston. That one time he came from Houston and told me Arcacho's over there.
But you would be surprised if I told you that Arcacho was in New Orleans in the summer of 63.
Yeah, because I tell you, I never heard of it. And
All right. So essentially, Garrison is trying to play like know-it-all. Like, would it surprise you if I had information that Arcacho was in New Orleans in 63? And Quiroga's just like, yeah, it would surprise me. Yeah, it would surprise me. Everything would surprise me. He's a cool customer, Rob.
Yeah.
And sorry for the bad audio. It is hard to hear, but it is very interesting. And this is from your Spreaker channel, from the vault, JFK assassination. And you have Quiroga interview, which lasts 2 hours, 2 Jack Martin interviews, which last over 4 hours, 2 Lawrence Howard interviews, which last over 3 hours, and a Lauren Hall interview, which lasts almost 3 hours. And I'm going to spell this out. D-A-G-O, Daryl Wayne Gardner interview.
Can't forget Daryl Wayne Gardner, man. You can't.
So definitely check that stuff out. And guys, like, you know, we know our audience has a ton of context and knowledge. Like, listen to this, make notes, send us an email, and we'll talk about certain points. If you
know, he would just eat them and stuff.
Yes, if you find that, definitely send it to us. we can clip it. So I have some more stuff, but I've been yapping for a little bit, so maybe I'll hand it back off to you.
All right, back to moi, and we'll travel over to Dallas a little bit and talk about the Sylvia Odio incident a little bit, Joe.
Okay.
I came across some very interesting documents. For those who don't know, Odio has stated that in late September or early October in 1963, 2 Cuban men came to her house and stated they were from JOEB, which is another anti-Castro group.
Right.
They were accompanied by an individual whom they introduced as Leon Oswald. Miss Odio stated that based upon photographs she had seen of Lee Harvey Oswald, she is certain that Leon Oswald is identical with Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, the reason this is a problem, folks, is because Oswald is supposed to be on his way to Mexico at this time and should not be accompanied by 2 Cubans at Sylvia Odio's house, right?
Big issue. Yeah.
Miss Odio stated that she is not certain if she misunderstood the first name of Leon or if the two Cuban men who introduced Oswald as understood him. Miss Odio stated her to write some letters to various businesses in Dallas and request funds for jury.
We're going back to funds, requesting funds.
The grift, folks. Miss Odio stated that both of her parents are presently in prison in Cuba. For this reason, she declined for fear her parents would possibly be harmed. Same reason as Mr. Quiroga, right? His family is in Cuba, maybe not in prison, but definitely in Cuba, and fear that they possibly could be harmed.
And Lauren Hall, of course, was in prison as well in Cuba. Yeah.
A few days later, one of the two Cuban individuals contacted her by telephone and stated they were leaving town, presumably to return to Miami, Florida, or Puerto Rico, which is where the headquarters of Jure is. Now, it seems like an awful stretch, Joe, to think of their only purpose for visiting the United States from Puerto Rico was to ask Miss Odio to call somebody to request some funds, that they could have probably just made a phone call instead of a very long trip.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. The individual who called Miss Odio only gave his name as Leopoldo, stated he was not going to have anything further to do with Leon Oswald since he considered him to be too loco.
Loco en la cabeza.
Yes. This individual, known only as Leopoldo, stated Oswald did not appear sincere in his anti-Castro sentiments. He told them he was an ex-Marine and could help them underground. However, he appeared very cynical and seemed to think that all Cubans hated Americans. According to Leopoldo, Oswald stated, quote, "I'll bet you Cubans could kill Kennedy for what he did to you at the Bay of Pigs, couldn't you?" End quote. According to Miss Odio, Leopoldo told them that the Cuban people bore no malice toward President Kennedy because of the Bay of Pigs episode. Now, certainly some of them did, but, not all of them. Next up is a Secret Service report, Joe, from the period covering April 24th to May 5th, 1964. And these were inquiries in Miami leading to the identity and current whereabouts of a father, Walter McCann, being unsuccessful. Juan Martin and, quote, Leopoldo have not been identified by sources in Miami. Personal interview of Rogelio Cisneros Diaz disclosed that he went to Dallas in June of 63 and contacted Sylvia Odio for the purpose of being introduced to an Uruguayan for the purchase of small arms. Re-interview of Rogelio Cisneros Diaz revealed that the Uruguayan is definitely identified as Juan Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want you to remember the last name Cisneros, because this will become important here in a minute. Joe, is the chat working for you? It hasn't moved in for me, it hasn't moved in 10 minutes.
It is working for me. You lagged for a couple seconds there. Maybe that's it. I don't know, but it is working for me.
My chat feed has not moved in 10 minutes.
Yes. South to West said, "Don't you know I'm loco?"
I'm still seeing the $20 super chat. That's how far behind mine is.
Oh, wow. Yeah, your chat is lagging. Yes.
Okay.
I took that away minutes and minutes ago. Yeah. Sorry about that. If you want to.
Well, no, I it's not on the screen, but the chat itself, that's where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah, you were behind a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm just making sure it's working. Okay.
It is.
All right. Now, reference is made to reports submitted by the reporting agent dated April 24, 64. And this is coming from the Secret Service Department in Miami, Florida. Not Dallas, not New Orleans. Monsignor Fitzpatrick, on April 27, 1964, of the Catholic Diocese of Miami, was re-interviewed relative to a Father Walter McCann. Monsignor Fitzpatrick searched his official Catholic directory, where he has all the names of all Catholic priests working in the United States, and the name of Father Walter McCann did not appear in the directory, Joe. Monsignor Fitzpatrick emphasized that if Father Walter McCann were assigned to the Miami Diocese, he would know of this. On the same date, I personally interviewed Sister William, director of the Centro Hispanic Catolico, the Catholic Spanish Center of 2nd Street, Miami, Florida, which assists all needy persons of Latin origin, including Cubans, relative to Father Walter McCann. And she stated that Father Walter McCann was not known to her either. Sister Williams suggested that if Father Walter McCann was believed to have come from Dallas, that inquiry of the Catholic Chancery on Kidwell Street in Dallas, Texas, might disclose further information regarding Father McCann. Discreet. Boy, the Secret Service loves doing things discreet, right? Yeah. Discreet and extensive inquiries among Cuban sources in Miami leading to the identities of Juan Martin and Leopoldo have been unsuccessful to date. In accordance with long-distance telephone call from Inspector Kelly on May 4th, Rogelio Cisneros was personally interviewed at his residence in Miami, Florida. He further identified himself as Rogelio Cisneros Diaz, an officer of Jure at Miami, Florida, and added that the name Eugenio is his designated war name, right? So a lot of these jury people had war names that they went by.
Right. Leopoldo was one as well, right?
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
So this guy, Rogelio Cisneros, his war name is Eugenio. Okay? Mr. Cisneros said he went to Dallas from Miami in June of 63 and traveled there alone by plane. He fixed the date of his travel in Dallas to June 63 by associating other events. He said that when he traveled to Dallas, their jury office in Dallas was already in operation, having been established in May of 63. Rogelio Cisneros stated that he went to Dallas specifically for the purpose of contacting Sylvia Odio, who was supposed to introduce him to a person in Dallas who was interested in selling them small arms. Cisneros said he contacted Sylvia Odio only once, and at that time he was accompanied only by Jorge Rodriguez Alvarado, their Dallas delegate, and no one else. Cisneros said that he does not know anybody named Leopoldo, adding that Leopoldo is not common as a Cuban name, and that so far as he knew, Leopoldo was not a member of Jure in Dallas. He further stated he did not know anybody named Leon, either as an individual or as a member of Jure in Dallas. Francisco Gutierrez, another Dallas member of Jure at the time Rogelio went there in June of 63, when interviewed, also stated that he had never heard of anybody named Leopoldo or Leon. Cisneros stated that the man to whom Sylvia introduced him believed to be an Uruguayan who was well known to Sylvia Odio from previous contact in Cuba. Cisneros said he did not approve of the Uruguayan's tactics and had discontinued further negotiations with him concerning the small arms. Cisneros added that he did not recall the Uruguayan's name other than to be Juan Martin, and indicated it might be Leopoldo, but he didn't think that it was. The above information was made known to Inspector Kelly by a long-distance telephone call on May the 5th, 64. After speaking with Inspector Kelly, the reporting agent recontacted Rogelio Cisneros by telephone, and the name of Juan Martin was mentioned to him. Cisneros spontaneously exclaimed that Juan Martin was the name of the Uruguayan who had been introduced to him by Sylvia Odio. This was confirmed by Francisco Gutierrez. Cisneros then related that Juan Martin operates a well-established wash-it-yourself laundry believed to be known as Dixie, located near one of the biggest or principal bowling alleys in Dallas, situated on one of the main streets. He stated that he had made only one contact with Juan Martin at the laundry mat, and although he was not familiar with Dallas, the location of the laundry was clarified for him by Gutierrez, who was more familiar with the city of Dallas. So we know Juan Martin was a Uruguayan. We know he was a small arms dealer. We know he ran a laundromat in Dallas. We know he had contact with Syvia Odio. But we didn't have any of these documents back when we were doing the whole Martin thing, Joe. But this clarifies things a lot more about who Juan or Johnny Martin was, right? This is the Johnny Martin guy, right? Now, I came across an interesting letter from James Rowley, who is, of course, the Secret Service, the head honcho at the Secret Service at the time, right? And it is to J. Lee Rankin of the Warren Commission on May the 5th, 1964. And it says this: Reverend Walter J. McCann was interviewed on April 30th, 1964 by Inspector Kelly. He is a 26-year-old priest presently attending Loyola University in New Orleans, but is a lifelong resident of Dallas, Texas. He spent a number of summer vacations in Mexico and has a fair command of the Spanish language, and has acted as the chaplain of the Cuban Catholic Committee of Dallas since 1961. The committee contacted employers in an attempt to find places for Cubans to work. It organized religious and social functions in order to make Dallas a friendly place for the Cubans who were sent there. In 1961, the organization had no funds and solicited funds among the people of Dallas. Here we go again. More grifting. And interesting that this Father McChann dude was going to college in New Orleans.
Huh.
But of course, in the summer when you don't have college, you go back to where you're from, right? More than likely.
Yeah, no. Yeah, in theory, for sure.
But this guy's young, 26-year-old priest, right? In college still? Okay. Spends many summer vacations in Mexico, Joe? Has a fair command of the Spanish language?
I would hope so.
In March of 1962, the Cuban Catholic Committee held a meeting in Miami that Father McChann attended.
Was that the Triple C, the Cuban Catholic Committee?
Yeah. At that time, the Catholic Relief Service set up a revolving fund for the Cubans in Dallas to furnish them relief until jobs could be found for them. A resettlement office was opened in Dallas, and Father McChann was given the responsibility for the conduct of the office, i.e., he's in charge of dispersing funds to needy Cubans, right?
No shortage of them.
Yeah. Joaquin Insus, a Cuban who was hired to take care of the office, is still an officer in the Cuban Relief Committee in Dallas. Father McChann stated that he never attended any of the political meetings of the Cuban groups that were represented by the Cubans in Dallas, although he was often cajoled and entreated to attend them. He felt that it was a better policy for him to remain aloof from the differences of opinion that occurred among the various Cuban groups represented by the Cuban population. So he's trying to stay out of the fray, right? Father McChann stated that during his work with the committee, he came to know Mrs. Connell, who was interested in assisting with the work of the committee and who was specifically interested in the welfare of Miss Sylvia Odio in view of Ms. Odio's mental condition, whatever the hell that was. Now, Joe, if you remember this, Mrs. Connell is the one that the FBI interviewed, is where we got the Johnny or Juan Martin name from. She's the one that told the FBI that this guy was meeting with Mrs. Odio, and that this guy is a drug runner or a gun runner. Sorry.
Right.
He acknowledges knowing a Mrs. Eugene Link, Albert Tamaya, Marcela Insue, and Hector Escoverio, all of whom he met during his work at the Cuban Catholic Committee. He also acknowledges knowing Colonel and Mrs. Castor. He said Colonel Castor is a retired Army colonel, and Mrs. Castor seemed generally interested in the plight of Cuban refugees, but that he always felt that Colonel Castor was, quote, playing the role of an intelligence officer in his contacts with the Cubans, that he seems to be more interested in their political beliefs than their economic plight or their social problems in the country. He stated he was introduced to Juan Martin, a.k.a. Johnny Martin, whom he described as a Latin, but definitely not a Cuban. He stated that Mr. Martin came to Syvia Odio's apartment one evening while he was there. Mr. Martin did not stay very long, and after he had left, Mrs. Odio stated that Mr. Martin represented a Cuban group or was doing a job for a Cuban group in Dallas. Father McCann was under the impression that Martin had an apartment or a house in Dallas, but that he did not live in Dallas and had a family in some other city. He stated that this was his only contact with Martin, but that Martin was apparently well known to Odio. Father McCann said that while he was interested in the Cuban groups in Dallas, he had contacted about 4 or 5 times by Wallace Heitman of the Dallas office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yeah,
He first made contact with Heitman when it came to his attention that one of these Cuban refugees was extorting money from other Cubans, making false promises to Cubans, was a disruptive influence in the Cuban community, and was considered by McCann to be a, quote, political Cuban rather than a Cuban who was interested in receiving any assistance from the committee. He could not recall the name of this Cuban, but he believes that the Cuban is still employed at Parkland Hospital.
Oh.
The other contacts Heitman had with him were drop-in visits by Heitman when Heitman was in the vicinity of the Lakewood building in Dallas. Heitman would stop and ask whether he knew of the existence of certain Cuban or a Cuban group. He had always cooperated to the best of his ability with the FBI. When asked concerning his knowledge of the JOEB group among the Cubans, he stated that he knew very little about the various groups and JOEB. He stated he knew of their existence, but never became interested in their views or their differences of opinion, blah, 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 blah. He stated Sylvia Odio told him that she wished to stay clear of this organization because the position her parents in Castro's prison was very precarious. He stated he had no recollection of Manuel Rodriguez, George Perro, or any of the officers of the Segundo Frente del Perro Escambre coming to his attention in connection with his work among the Cubans. He denied knowing anything about Lee Harvey Oswald prior to November 22nd, and he stated that sometime in December 1963, Sylvia Odio informed him that a group of Cubans had brought Oswald to her apartment. She told him that she discussed this matter fully with FBI agents in early December. Subsequent to his living in New Orleans, Sylvia Odio had written a letter to him, which she again stated that she had discussed her meeting of Oswald with government officials. McCann was not certain whether she meant that she had another discussion or whether she had talked to someone also about the subject. He felt that Sylvia Odio's aggravated mental condition since November 22nd was caused by her concern that the Cuban community might become involved in some way with the assassination in view of their association with Oswald shortly before the assassination. She fainted at her employment when she learned of the assassination of the president and the arrest of Oswald. However, he stated that she is inclined to be highly dramatic, and she may be building up her belief in an association with Oswald out of all proportion to what it was, if in fact there was any. He believed that any association with Oswald was extremely limited and confined to the one instance in which Oswald is alleged to have visited her home with, quote, a group from the jury. He denied ever having a discussion with Odio as to the identity of this group and denied ever hearing the name Leopoldo mentioned other than in connection with this visit. He did state, however, that it is inconceivable that Oswald was brought to Syvia Odio and introduced to her by anyone from the jury other than someone well known to her, i.e. these guys were probably not rando people just showing up to her apartment. She likely knew them.
Mm-hmm.
He said a man by the name of Alientada, who is said to be the representative for the jury group in Dallas, would know who was active in the group. Alientada is said to be a certified public accountant, CPA in Dallas, and frequently came to Odio looking for help for jury. Odio is described as 26 years of age, who now lives with her 3 small children, her sister Sarita, single, 23, and another sister, Annie, 18. Father McChann says he did not know Sylvia Odio prior to March of 63 when she came to Dallas from Puerto Rico, but that he knew her sister Sarita in connection with the Cuban Relief Committee, and that he also knew her younger sister Annie, who was attending school in Dallas prior to Miss Odio's arrival.
Rob, when did she say she met Father McCann? Can you give me that date again?
March 63.
Okay. I'm gonna follow this up with something after you're done.
Yeah. Father McCann was requested by the Secret Service to call Mrs. Odio in an attempt to secure from her the name of the jury representative who accompanied Oswald to her apartment that day. So now they're asking Father McCann to do a little undercover work, right? He agreed to place the call, stating that if he could not induce her to tell him who the people were, he can induce her to tell it to the proper authorities. He said Odio would be reluctant to give any information which might compromise her position among the Cubans, blah, blah, blah. Father McCann stated that it was the duty of every citizen to cooperate to the fullest extent in the president's commission's investigation, and that he felt he was bound in conscience to give whatever assistance that he could.
I'm sure.
He said he did not feel he was violating any confidence in giving any information previously given, since he had been informed by Odio that she had discussed this information with the proper authorities. He did not realize at the time that she had not made a full and frank disclosure of the names of the people who brought Oswald to her. Father McCann said that he did not feel he could call Miss Odio in the presence of Inspector Kelly, and that he would prefer to talk to her in private and then report back. Okay.
I bet. Yes.
It was agreed that he would call Odio shortly before 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on April 30th, and he was furnished the necessary funds to make the call from a payphone down the street. Upon his return to Inspector Kelly's room at about 7:30 p.m., okay, he said he'd made the call to Miss Odio in Dallas, and she was very anxious to discuss the entire matter. She advised him the only information she could provide on the people who visited her was that one of them said he was using the code name Leopoldo, that the second man she could identify, Joe, as Eugenio Cisneros.
Huh.
And the third man, huh?
You told me in the chat to remember that name.
Yes. And he used his war name. He didn't use his God-given name.
And his war name is Eugenio.
Right. But his real name was like Regalio or something, right?
Yeah, bro. Yep.
She says specifically, the first man was using the name Leopoldo. The second man she could identify as Eugenio Cisneros. And the third man was introduced to her as Leon. She said Leon did not use the name Oswald in her presence, but that she recognized him after November 22nd as being the same man who was arrested for the assassination of Kennedy. She further described the men as being, quote, greasy-looking Cubans, more like Mexicans than Cubans, although they did not have Mexican accents. She stated
the Mexican thing again.
Yeah. She stated that they said they were members of JOEB, and they had a letter in Spanish which they wished her to translate into English for the purpose of sending copies of this letter to United States companies to secure funds for their cause. She further stated that in the course of the conversation, the man she now identifies as Oswald spoke, quote, a couple of words in broken Spanish. And further, the others informed her that they were going to make a trip. These men did not enter her apartment or sit down. Apparently, they just stayed in the doorway. She said she was a little afraid of them since she did not really know them, although they used the underground code word names of her father and mother and seemed very familiar with her family and conditions in Cuba. Her sister Annie, who is now in Miami, was babysitting with Ms. Odio's children that evening. Ms. Odio was ready to go out, and she never did ask the visitors to come in and sit down. The entire conversation she had with them was in the doorway of her apartment at the Crestwood Apartments. She is not able to fix the date any better than sometime at the end of September in 1963. Mrs. Odio said she refused to assist them in their project of translating the letter, saying she ain't got no time for that. They get mixed up in the affairs of the jury. They left saying that they would be in touch with her again. The man she says was Leopoldo called her on the phone the next day, and in part of the conversation, he told her that this guy Leon was willing to do anything, that he had laughed at the Cubans saying they had no guts and that it would be easy to kill Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs invasion. Odio said that when the group first came to the apartment, they asked for her sister, Sarita. And when they were told that Sarita was not there, but that she was Sylvia, they said, well, you are the one we wanted to talk to anyway.
Right. She was the oldest.
Sylvia further said that she did not tell everything to the FBI because they did not ask her these questions. She said she felt the FBI interviewed her improperly and when they came to her place of employment and she asked about her and interviewed her there, and it became a source of embarrassment to her, and she later had to quit her job at the chemical company partly on this account. Father McCann insisted that in the latest conversation, and in most of the conversations he had with Sylvia about this matter, she insisted that the man she identified as Oswald had a mustache, or at least looked like he had not shaved recently. Think he was, quote, disgusting looking because of his dark beard and unkempt appearance.
Doesn't sound like Lee.
Definitely doesn't sound like Lee. In response to a question concerning a telephone call Ms. Odio is alleged to have made to New Orleans in recent months, Father McChann said that she had never called him in New Orleans, but Sylvia had an aunt and uncle in New Orleans. He identified the uncle as Dr. Augustin Guittard, a physics professor at Xavier University in New Orleans. And he knows that Mrs. Odio frequently calls Dr. Guittard, as he has been in Guittard's home on occasions when she's called him. He said Dr. Guittard has engaged in no political activities among the Cuban groups in New Orleans or Dallas, insofar as he knows. Father McCann was asked whether he had an opinion as to whether Syvia Odio actually saw Oswald on the night that it alleged. He replied that he is skeptical of this story. Sylvia did not mention this visit to anyone until after November 22nd. And he has a strong feeling that either because of her mental condition, she now believes the third man in the group was Oswald after seeing his photographs and after reading the newspaper accounts about him. or that she may be, because of her crying need for recognition, be attempting, quote, in this way to associate herself with a spectacular event in history, Father McCann said. However, that while she is very mature, intelligent, this may be a subconscious reaction on her part, and she may not be able to accept or perceive the actual truth herself. So he's basically saying that she's a head case. She's got mental problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Father McCann said that Mrs. Odio had expressed a desire to him to be interviewed, saying that she will be perfectly frank in any interview with the authorities, that she is most anxious to clear up the matter and will cooperate wholeheartedly in any inquiry and give her recollection of the matter to the best of her ability. Father McCann says that this is his opinion, that she will be entirely cooperative in an interview and will be as honest as her current mental state will allow her to be. In her telephone conversation with Mrs. Odio, told Father McCann that John Martin is a Uruguayan who is supplying arms purchased in some South American countries to some Cuban groups. Odio is now employed as a secretary at the Kroll Associates in Dallas and has requested that any interviews in connection with this matter be done at her home and not at her place of work. Father McCann appeared to be very cooperative and friendly and expressed a desire to be as helpful as possible in securing the cooperation of Mrs. Odio. Very truly yours, James J. Rowley. And of course, this is the director of the Secret Service, Joe.
Yeah.
Writing this letter to J. Lee Rankin in May of 1964.
Yeah.
Now we know that later on, in 1964, when the FBI finally got around to showing her pictures of Lauren Hall, Lawrence Howard, and William Seymour, whom they believed, just from the fact that Lauren Hall and Seymour were arrested in Dallas around the same time, that they were the ones that went to see Syvia Odio. But she, after seeing their pictures, said, these are not the guys. These are not the guys.
Right. She did not did not identify them.
Correct.
Whether she was covering or not, she did not.
Right. So very interesting, this whole scenario.
Very, very. I'm sorry.
And it's all based on another grift. You know, they want her to solicit funds.
Yeah.
Right?
She's an important person. I mean, her dad was a significant, person in jury, and maybe she was operating as his proxy in a sense because he was in Cuba.
Yeah, James is asking, any thoughts on the true identity of visitors? My guess, it was some random Cubans. I mean, she clearly identified one as this Eugenio Cisneros. The first one, they were trying to tie, because Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard were using war names.
Right.
Hall's alias is Lorenzo Pasillo, and I believe, what the hell was Lawrence Howard using?
Oh, Angelo Morgado? No. Angelo Morgado?
No, that's a different guy altogether.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But anyway, Lawrence Howard had a war name as well. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It might be Angelo. I don't know.
Sally had a good question, and I think it's good to explain this, and I don't even have to because the chat already did. What is a war name? And the double B coming through. A war name is an unofficial name used in mercenary groups. We used to call it signs in our military. And James said, Sally, many of them had families in Cuba, like we just touched on earlier in the show. So they took on, quote, war names, aka aliases, I'm adding that part, so as to not be identified in their covert activities.
Think the movie Top Gun, and you have Goose and Maverick. Those are their war names, if you will.
Call sign. Yeah.
Just something to be called other than your real name. you know, because you don't want your real name out there all the time, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you have family in Cuba or a dad or not that Sylvia Odio was using one, but just to use her situation, family in prison in Cuba, right?
Or you know, you're doing sketchy shit with sketchy people. You don't want people to know your real name. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is why they were using war names or aliases, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but a very good question and something not a lot of people might know off the top of their heads. So, Paula, when you were reading this, Rob, she said Sylvia would get faint when overstressed. That was the War Commission excuse for discounting her. And apparently McCann took up that excuse for her as well, right?
Yeah, it didn't stop Father McChann from throwing stones to her.
Well, Big Bad Josh, 69. I think Sylvia also had a sexual relationship with her priest. No? Question mark?
Yeah, but turns out, Joe, this guy has no affiliation at all with the Catholic diocese. He's not really a priest. Shocker.
McCann.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many Catholic priests you know that are taking college classes down in you know, what are you studying?
Yeah. And they both were 26 too. I think Sylvia and McCann were 26 at the time, right?
Yeah. So this guy's pretending to be a Catholic priest.
Mm-hmm.
Because hey, it's a good grift. He made it to be in charge of distributing money to the Cubans. You should think this guy wasn't pocketing some?
Yeah. And that's the pattern here, Rob. Everyone had their different niche of the grift. You know? Everyone. And yeah, I'm not sure I really blame Sylvia if like a bunch of scafoozas came onto her doorstep a couple times a month or every couple months and asked for money. I think that would be relatively normal.
Yeah.
I don't see it as
a pretty common occurrence.
Yeah, I don't see it out of the realm of possibility. James, this Juan Martin character certainly deserves a closer look. Well, James, while Rob was reading this, I happened to go in our Dropbox, Rob, and pull up the Johnny Juan folder. And despite sometimes we are unorganized, we have every Martin and their files in a Dropbox folder. So I pulled up, just to build up on what you just said, Rob, Sylvia Odio's Warren Commission testimony. And wouldn't you know, they ask about this, of course, because this was a major issue with placing Oswald, if he was in Mexico City, and he was actually the Leon here. This was a big problem, right? So this was a lot of drama going on in April, May 64, right?
Yeah.
So let me bring up the Warren Commission testimony very quickly, Rob, and maybe we'll end after this, of Syvia Odio, and of course talks about Johnny Martin, who was from Uruguay. I heard he was involved with the movement, and he said that he had a lot of contacts in Latin America to buy arms, particularly in Brazil, and that if he were in contact with one of our chief leaders of the underground, he would be able to sell him secondhand arms that we could use in our revolution. This is Syvia Odio to Mr. Liebler in, I believe it's sometime in the summer of 64. But they talk about, guess who? Eugenio. They talk about, before I left for Puerto Rico, Odio says Eugenio arrived June 20th from Miami to see Johnny Martin. So this Eugenio war name guy who was Cisneros, right, Rob? Allegedly?
Yeah.
Arrived from Miami to see Johnny Martin, allegedly, in, I don't know if it's Puerto Rico or Dallas, but somewhere there. He was supposed to arrive June 14th, but he never did, Odio says, and I called 2 times to make another appointment with Johnny, and he just arrived in time for me to see him. Then it was a time we met, not Alentado, which I think you just said a couple minutes ago. The other one, Rodriguez, Alvarado, both names you just mentioned. And this is in our Warren Commission. So they went to the house, blah, blah, blah. So I went to Ponce, Puerto Rico to get my children. I moved. Hold on, I moved there exactly. I'm just going to skip this a little bit. How many times have you met with Eugenio here in Dallas? Once, Sylvia Odio says. That was in June of 63. That's right. So it was not Eugenio who was with Leon when those men came to your apartment. No, I would have known Eugenio. He was a very close friend of my family, and he did underground activity with my mother and father. So I don't know if Silvio's running cover here for Eugenio or Cisneros. I just don't know. Do you know?
She did tell McCann that it was Eugenio that came to her apartment.
Okay, but she's not telling the Warren Commission this. But
correct.
Liebler is not the stupidest, Scafuza. He goes, do you know Father McCann? Yes. Do you remember that he called you on the telephone? Yes, he did call me on the telephone. On April 30th, 1964. Interesting that he has an exact date of this.
Because he has the letter from James Rowley.
Oh, that's true. Yes, that's a good point. Thank you. Do you remember discussing this whole question with him at this time? Yes, he asked me if I was withholding evidence. And Ms. Odio lived on Lover's Lane. Little side note here. But they, the Odio testimony is very long, and I'm not going to go through it.
Hold on. Go back up for a second, Joe. Go back up.
Of course, yeah.
Right kind of same page where you stopped. And down a little bit.
Oh, did you tell Father McCann? Here?
Yeah.
Did you tell, Liebler says, she asked Odio. He asked Odio, did you tell Father McCann that one of the men, did you tell him the names of the men who were there? I told him what I knew, the names of the men that I knew. Liebler, you told him one was Leopoldo. Yes. But you did not tell him that you could identify the other man as Eugenio. That's right. You did not tell him that. So he's pressing her. No. Now, I have a report before me of an interview with Father McCann by a representative of the U.S. Secret Service, Rob, in which that Father McCann told the Secret Service agent that you had told him that one of the men was Eugenio, but you indicated now that this is not so. Mrs. Odio, no, perhaps he could have misunderstood me because he had the same problems with names. Yeah. Probably I did tell him that the man was not Eugenio. Do you remember discussing with him Eugenio's visit to you in June? I think I discussed it with him, yes, during that telephone conversation, yes. So, Liebler, did you tell Father McCann that the name Oswald was never used in your presence by any of these men? Never was used except to introduce me. And the time they left, they did not refer to him as Oswald. Liebler, but they did in fact introduce him as Leon Oswald, and I shook hands with him. That is what you told Agent Hosty when he interviewed you on December 1863, and that is indicated in his report. Oh, yes, Odio says. Now we have a report from Agent Hosty talk about Leopoldo's telephone name, and this goes on for 25 pages.
Yeah.
But Liebler had that report in front of him without a doubt, right? And is trying to catch Odio in a lie to possibly discredit her and her, whatever, her identification or whoever came to visit her, because that was a big problem for the timeline of the Warren Commission when Oswald was allegedly in Mexico City. So crazy stuff here. And to James's point, the Juan Martin character certainly deserves a closer look. I think it deserves a relook by Rob and I, because it's probably been 2 years since we really looked into it. Save tonight.
Wow. And the chat's going crazy, knowing Frank Sturgis had a John Martin alias. It wasn't just Sturgis in Watergate that had a John Martin alias.
It was not.
It was also James McCord had one, and Eugenio Martinez had two different John Martin aliases with a different initial.
Yeah, John P. and maybe John M. or something.
Yeah. So 3 of the Watergate burglars had John Martin aliases.
Can't make it up, folks. You cannot make it up. But Rob, I think at some point we should soon take a relook and do some Juan Martin searches, maybe in the new documents, because we haven't yet.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how far we'll get with the Uruguayan Juan Martin, but
never know.
Juan Martinez, that might be his Juan Martin. He might have just shortened it. You know what I mean?
And that's what a lot of them did.
Most Latinos are Martinez, not Martin.
Exactly. A lot of the Hispanic gentlemen tried to shorten their names to make it more American. Martinez to Martin being the most obvious example of that.
Yes.
Damn. Bro, this might be a record. We're almost at 2:47, Rob.
Well, we had a lot to pack into this show. And, I was late, so we're running a little late in the evening. We're keeping Sally up way late tonight.
I know. Sorry, Sally, but we thank you for staying up with us.
Yes.
I hope you're wearing your free Ruby shirt. Mine is on the way and should be here by next week.
Cool. And there's a link in the description if you would like to grab some merch for yourself. There's a link in the description if you like to get some Silk City hot sauce for yourself. And there's a link in the description if you would like to become a channel member and join the club. That's how you can support the show. And we appreciate each and every one of you doing that and hanging out with us and contributing in the chat, because without you, we'd just be talking to thin air. Like Dean Andrews.
Yes.
Speaking of Dean Andrews, Joe.
Dino. Oh, wait, we gotta go to Cam.
Ruby Cam. Hey, Ruby, you ready to dance? Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Get your furry butt over here. Thank you guys for hanging out. Always fun.
The greatest lies are told in the name of truth. The greatest crimes are committed in the name of justice.
Male.
The quotation is Jim Garrison's. It could be used for him or against him in this strange case. Good night.
Hope you get some sleep.
You're right, James. God damn, what a show. Where is it?
Sorry.
There it is.
It's at the same time.
Yep. Come back next Wednesday when it's for all the members, including Spooks. We'll see you next Wednesday, folks. Until then,
have a great weekend, everyone.
Yes, enjoy your Memorial Day weekend.
Yes.
Saluting all former military. We salute you and thank you for your service.
And current, and special shout out to Tiny.
Yes, thank you for your service, Tiny, to the country. Thank you, PC. Thank you.
Hey.
All right, we love you guys. We'll see you next Wednesday. Peace out.
Peace.
Peace.